Step 2. Build your portable god of copper. And frustration dynamos are absolutely beautiful in abstract theory. Relatively simple mechanical devices that convert direct rotational movement into usable electrical current. Old bicycles from the 50s and 60s had them permanently installed to light weak incandescent headlights. Modern crank flashlights use miniaturized versions of the same principle. They're literally 19th century technology, patented when our great-great-grandparents still rode horses. That suddenly became critically relevant and post-apocalyptic, because they don't depend on fossil fuel, inconsistent sunlight, or any complex industrial infrastructure. Just you, your raw and limited muscular strength, and the unwavering physics that doesn't negotiate. But there is a dirty and cruel trick about dynamos that absolutely nobody mentions in the pretty and ecological advertisements for sustainable energy and live off-grid. I'll reveal this very soon as you understand the basics of how to assemble one. Find a bicycle dynamo in any abandoned bike shop. There will be literally hundreds of them, rusting on shelves. You specifically want the old type that physically presses against the bicycle tire through direct friction. Classic designs are much more robust and repairable than the modern sophisticated hub dynamos that are integrated directly into the wheel axle. Yes, friction dynamos are objectively less energy efficient. Yes, they create much more wasted friction and useless heat. But you can repair a friction dynamo using twisted wire, old electrical tape, and creative curses. Modern hub dynamos need precision bearings and specialized parts that simply don't exist anymore. After industrial collapse, mounted firmly on a functional bicycle wheel with an inflated tire. If you don't have a complete bicycle with frame and everything, a single isolated wheel and an improvised wooden or metal stand work perfectly. You just need the ability to spin the wheel freely, without excessive friction. Connect the two output wires from the dynamo to a simple 6-volt LED. Spin the wheel with consistent force. The light turns on in pale but definite brightness. This moment is almost religious, transcendent even. You just created visible light from absolute nothing except body sweat and physical rotation. Photons emanating from electrons that you personally put in motion. It's the closest moment to divinity you'll experience in the apocalypse. Now try doing this for 4 consecutive hours without stopping and then tell me honestly how you're feeling physically. Visually, you're literally a giant conscious hamster on an infinite wheel. But unlike the hamster, you're painfully aware of your own existential futility. The typical bicycle dynamo generates miserably about 3 watts at normal and comfortable cycling speed. 3 watts minuscule. A modern smartphone charger easily pulls 5 to 10 watts continuously. A typical efficient LED bulb uses between 5 to 15 watts, depending on brightness. You're pedaling dangerously at the absolute limit of useful electrical relevance. To completely charge a dead cell phone, let's say typical battery capacity of 10 watt-hours, you'd need to pedal intensely for 3 to 4 hours without absolutely any break. Your thighs will burn. Your knees will hurt. Your dignity will evaporate, but you'll have 80% battery on a phone that has no signal, nor internet, nor absolutely anything useful. Congratulations. And here's the dirty trick I promised to reveal. The overwhelming majority of traditional dynamos generate alternating current AC, not direct current DC that all your modern electronics desperately need. Alternating current oscillates back and forth in cycles, useless for batteries and digital circuits. Modern electronics, phones, tablets, LEDs, absolutely everything need direct current flowing consistently in one direction. You urgently need a rectifier, specifically a diode bridge that converts chaotic AC into usable DC. Diodes are small, cheap electronic components and completely invisible in cinematographic apocalypses because they're technically too boring to be visually interesting or narratively dramatic. But without them, your carefully assembled dynamo is just an expensive toy that heats up your sensitive electronic devices and irreversibly burns delicate circuits. But with them, for tiny diodes connected in bridge configuration, you have real usable power. The true and medical risk here: serious injuries from accumulated repetitive strain. Pedaling intensely for hours daily systematically destroys knees, ankles, hips, and lumbar spine. You'll trade temporary light and immediate comfort for permanent mobility and future functionality. And in the brutal apocalypse, mobility is literally life. Inability to walk is a slow death sentence. Choose extremely wisely what you charge electrically and when you sacrifice calories pedaling. Oh yes, and about that crucial car battery secret I mentioned way back in the opening. Hold tight a bit longer in anticipation. First, you absolutely need to understand solar panels, and especially why they race simultaneously. Your best possible hope and inevitable greatest disappointment. Step 4. Transform abandoned trash into useful energy or into your tombstone. Every electric motor is essentially a generator if you simply spin it mechanically backwards. Read that sentence again, slowly, and let the simplicity sink in. Fundamental physics doesn't care one bit about your intention or purpose. Push electricity into a motor through wires. It obediently spins, producing movement. Manually spin a motor through external force. It pushes electricity back through the same wires. It's perfectly reversible, elegantly symmetrical, and completely underutilized because nobody thinks like this intuitively. You specifically want DC direct current motors, those with visible carbon brushes and obvious segmented commutator. Cheap home fans, old cordless electric drills, antique kitchen blenders, large motorized toys. AC alternating current motors technically work as generators too, but need precise external capacitors and deep electrical engineering knowledge that you probably definitely don't possess. Stay rigidly with simple DC, straightforward, stupid, functional, reliable. Your most immediately practical DIY project, miniature stream hydroelectric generator. Find constant running water. Doesn't need to be a dramatic and cinematographic waterfall. Just perpetual and consistent flow. Build a functional water wheel with resistant wooden boards and a robust central shaft. Half-inch PVC pipe works perfectly. Connect your salvaged DC motor to the rotating shaft using improvised pulleys of different sizes, or rigid direct coupling if you are very lucky. The running water patiently spins the wheel. The wheel spins the connected shaft. The shaft mechanically spins the motor. The motor reluctantly generates measurable electricity at the terminals. This is literally medieval technology ingeniously applied to 20th century motors. Our ancestors made wheat flour like this for 1,000 years. You're making precious watts. The complete technological progression of humanity, ladies and gentlemen. The critical trick is multiplicative gear ratio. Your motor needs to spin quickly to generate usable voltage, ideally 1,000 plus RPM or more. But your water will spin painfully slowly, maybe 30 to 60 RPM in good flow. You desperately need to mechanically amplify the rotation. Use pulleys of drastically different sizes. Large 30 centimeters wheel on the water wheel, tiny 3 centimeters pulley on the motor. 10:1 ratio transforms 50 RPM into 500 RPM. Basic 7th grade lever physics that's suddenly objectively worth more than expensive university degree. Visually, it's exactly like those romantic picturesque watermills in classic Dutch paintings, except visibly ugly, mechanically noisy, and covered in apparent desperate improvisation. A decent hydroelectric setup can consistently generate 10 to 30 watts continuously without stopping. This is absolutely constant and reliable power, not the pathetic and frustrating intermittency of pedaling when tired or desperately praying for sun between clouds. 30 sustained watts for 24 complete hours are exactly 720 watt-hours daily, generously sufficient for complete nighttime LED lighting. Charging multiple electronic devices simultaneously, even a small communication radio operating intermittently. It's objectively modest, but it's absolutely reliable, and in the brutal apocalypse, consistent reliability is infinitely worth more than intermittent power. The real risk here is stupid drowning and fatal hypothermia. You're working dangerously close to fast-running water, frequently in slippery and precarious conditions, installing heavy and unbalanced equipment. Fall carelessly, hit your head on a submerged rock, and you quickly turn into one more swollen and grotesque body floating downstream. For nobody to find, use safety ropes tied firmly. Always work with a watching partner. Don't be the tragic idiot who heroically survived the apocalypse but stupidly died slipping on moss. Alternative for those who don't have a convenient stream, completely improvised wind generators. Same fundamental physical logic. Aerodynamic blades capture kinetic wind, spin a connected shaft. Shaft spins motor, motor generates usable electricity. But building genuinely efficient blades is sophisticated aeronautical engineering naively disguised as simple carpentry. Poorly designed and unbalanced blades create wasted turbulence, not useful torque. You need consistent wind of 15 kilometers per hour for genuinely useful output. And violent storms completely destroy poorly anchored equipment, transforming your careful generator into a deadly decapitating missile. So there's also the fascinating thermal option. Take thermoelectric generators that convert temperature difference directly into electricity. Using the quantum Seebeck effect, place one side near hot, fire other exposed to cold air, and electrons spontaneously start flowing through the semiconductor material. The brutal problem. Commercial TEG generators easily cost hundreds of dollars and only miserably generate to the 5 watts. In optimal conditions in the apocalypse, you absolutely don't find this in nature, but worth mentioning because if you loot an abandoned camp of rich off-grid gadget enthusiasts, Now you know exactly what that strange little rectangular device does and is worth. And finally we arrive. Let's talk extensively about batteries. Because every precious watt you laboriously generate is completely useless if you can't reliably store it for when the sun inevitably sets, the wind stops blowing, or you're physically too exhausted to pedal anymore. Including finally that car battery savior trick I've been sadistically stringing along since the absolute beginning. Step 5. Learn to store electrons like a neurotic squirrel. Batteries are essentially complex chemical magic superficially disguised as simple physics. Migrating lithium ions, reversible redox reactions, electrochemical potential, conductive electrolytes, all this fundamentally means put electricity in a metal box and controlledly take it out later. But batteries genuinely hate you personally. They deeply hate being completely discharged to zero. They violently hate being supercharged beyond capacity. They hate freezing cold. They hate scalding heat. They hate physical vibration. They hate simply existing. Every complete charge and discharge cycle literally kills them a little bit irreversibly. You're using living electrochemical organisms that commit slow and inevitable molecular suicide. But you absolutely have no better choice. Automotive car battery, the absolutely classic and ubiquitous apocalyptic option. Specifically, sealed 12-volt lead-acid batteries. You find hundreds of them in literally every abandoned vehicle rusting on roads. Brutally heavy 15 to 25 kilos of lead and acid, chemically toxic. Technologically primitive, but incredibly abundant and surprisingly robust. A typical car battery generously stores 40 to 60 ampere-hours of capacity at nominal 12 volts. That calculates to 480 to 720 total watt-hours, sufficient for continuous LED lighting for entire days or device charging for complete weeks if you're careful and disciplined. Here is finally the savior trick I've irritatingly promised 3 times. Automotive car batteries are specifically designed for very high and short current, violently starting combustion engines. Not prolonged slow and deep discharge. Use them as marine deep cycle batteries and they die quickly. Only 20 to 50 miserable cycles if you regularly discharge below 50%. But in the real apocalypse, you definitely don't have expensive specialized marine deep cycle batteries. You have common car batteries looted from abandoned Fiat Uno. So here's the life-saving trick. Never ever discharge below 12 to 2 measured volts, approximately 50%. Remaining charge. This magically extends lifespan to 200 to 300 complete cycles. Use a cheap digital voltmeter permanently connected to constantly monitor. When it reaches exactly 12 to 2 volts, immediately stop draining completely. Yes, you're consciously using only half the total theoretically available capacity. But half of many cycles is objectively better than everything a few cycles. Cold apocalyptic math, 300 useful watt-hours per cycle times the 150 cycles equals 75,000 total watt-hours of lifespan, versus 600 watt-hours times 30 cycles equals mere 18,000 watt-hours if you destroy the battery. Being greedy, disciplined patience literally quadruples your total available energy over time. Safe connection DIY. Grab robust alligator clips. Firmly connect to battery terminals. Red equals positive always. Black equals negative always. Reversing this causes violent sparks and possible facial explosion. Mandatorily add protection fuses, 10 to 15 amps for typical circuits. Connect your solar charge controller directly to the battery. Connect your devices through efficient DC-DC converters or expensive inverters if you absolutely need AC. Visually, you carefully built a miniature and delicate electrical ecosystem. Sun silently feeds panels. Panels patiently charge battery. Battery comfortably feeds life. It's delicate, balanced, and breaks irreversibly if you're careless or ignorant. Lithium-ion batteries, the modern and sophisticated ones, salvaged from old laptops. Broken power banks. Abandoned power tools, much more energy efficient, impressive 150 to 200 watt-hours per kilo versus miserable 30 to 40 for primitive lead acid, but they're extremely demanding and temperamental. Overcharge them 0 to 1 volts beyond the limit, they dangerously swell and violently explode in flames. Discharge them completely to 0, they die permanently and irreversibly. They mandatorily need sophisticated BMS battery management systems, complex electronics you probably can't repair or build from scratch in the apocalypse. Treat lithium batteries as absolutely non-renewable finite resources. Use them wisely, but don't naively depend on replacing them. The real catastrophic risk with batteries is explosive hydrogen gas. Lead-acid batteries during active charging produce molecular H's, extremely explosive in low concentrations. Tiny spark plus accumulated hydrogen equals violent explosion that literally tears off your hands and permanently blinds you. Always ventilate generously. Absolutely no smoke or flames near charging batteries. No careless sparks. No ignorant arrogance. The apocalypse is already sufficiently dangerous without you transforming into a burned human. Cigar because you ignored basic middle school chemistry. And about that distilled water question I mentioned? Vented lead-acid batteries gradually lose water through electrolysis. You need to periodically add distilled water or they internally dry out and die. Never ever use tap water. Dissolved minerals irreversibly destroy the delicate internal chemistry. Pure distilled. Only distilled. Boil common water. Capture the condensed vapor. Collect it. Laborious. But absolutely necessary. Your complete electrical system is now objectively your most valuable possession. More valuable than canned food you eventually find lootable food. More valuable than weapons violent fights attract problems. Electricity is information. Communication, modern medicine. Sanitation, psychological morale. It's invisible, silent, and powerfully transformative. But wait, there's still the final most important part. The part that objectively determines whether you're a survivor or anonymous statistic. Step 6. Illuminate your miserable existence with maximum efficiency. You spent entire days building improvised generators, connecting solar panels, carefully balancing temperamental batteries, everything absolutely for this. Artificial light, functional night vision, basic psychological security. The singular thing that fundamentally separates civilized humans from nocturnal animals isn't superior intelligence or complex language. It's our pathetic evolutionary dependence on seeing clearly in the dark. LEDs absolutely changed everything about lighting. An old and efficient incandescent bulb pulls 60 wasted watts to produce mere 800 lumens. A modern efficient LED produces the same 800 lumens with only 8 to 10 watts consumed. 7 times more energy efficient. In the brutal apocalypse, efficiency is directly lifetime. Every saved watt is an extra night of light, an extra hour of reading, an extra preserved battery cycle. Your basic lighting configuration, flexible 12 volts LED strip. You find rolls of them in looted electronic stores, abandoned trailers, automotive installations. Cut to desired length. There are specific visible marks for safe cutting. Carefully solder wires. Connect directly to your 12 volts battery. No unnecessary converters. No efficiency loss. Pure and elegantly simple. 5 meters of typical LED strip. 300 individual LEDs pull about 20 for total watts and illuminate an entire room with almost blinding brightness. But you absolutely don't need blinding. You need sufficient and functional. 10 isolated LEDs pull only 0 to 8 watts and provide perfectly adequate reading light. That calculates to 30 plus hours of continuous lighting from a single car battery charge. Smart tactical DIY. Create separate lighting zones. Work area bright, 5 to 10 watts. Common area moderate, 3 to 5 watts. Sleeping area dim, 1 to 2 watts. Use independent separate switches. Illuminate only exactly what you need when you need it. Every watt literally counts. Every lumen is precious. Visually, you're living exactly like a claustrophobic Soviet submarine. Purely functional minimal lighting, dramatic deep shadows, absolute brutal efficiency. Completely forget decorative aesthetics. Pure function is beauty now. Portable flashlights, your essential mobile lighting. Modern LED flashlights produce impressive 100 to 1000 lumens with only 1 to 10 watts consumed. A 3-watt head flashlight frees your hands for critical night work. Absolutely essential. Completely non-negotiable. The real risk of lighting isn't electrical. It's psychological and tactically strategic. Bright light attracts unwanted attention kilometers away. Other people see light and immediately think resources, security, easy targets to rob. You're announcing your exact position every night. Always use heavy curtains. Position light away from external windows. Consider red lighting preserves night vision and is less visible externally. But light also maintains mental sanity. Total darkness for months causes clinical depression, paralyzing anxiety, cognitive collapse. Humans biologically need circadian rhythms. We need day and night, even artificial ones. Your complete electrical system is now gloriously functional. Generation, solar, dynamo, hydro, storage managed battery, consumption efficient LEDs. You have light, you have communication. You have information. You transcended the dark ages using scrap and middle school physics. So you're still alive. What an absolutely delicious surprise. You took completely crumbled civilization, applied to 100-year-old physics, and reignited illumination. Not with the arrogant reliability of continental power grids, but with the trembling humility of Someone who deeply understands that every watt is conquered with sweat, patience, or merciful sun. Remember that battery secret I promised to reveal, already revealed. It was hidden in the middle of the text about never discharging below 12 to 2 volts. Most of you didn't notice, because you were busy memorizing voltages, typical, critical information hidden in simple conversation, and you ignore it because it didn't arrive wrapped with an alert. Those open loops about rectifiers, controllers, gear ratios, all meticulously closed. The final irony, you spent decades complaining about electricity bills, ignoring the complexity that keeps your world illuminated. Now you'd give half your teeth for a reliable outlet. Electricity isn't magic, never was. It's just persistent physics applied by monkeys too stubborn to accept darkness. And apparently, you're one of those monkeys. Now go spin something and make light. Because tomorrow night will also be dark. The power grid just went down, forever. It wasn't a sophisticated cyber attack orchestrated by hackers in dark basements. It wasn't a cinematographic solar storm that fried transformers in dramatic cascade. It wasn't even a terrorist EMP that shut everything down in a Hollywood electromagnetic pulse. It was simply the inevitable collapse of an infrastructure that everyone knew had been hanging by wires since the 70s, kept running with institutional duct tape and bureaucratic prayers, deferred maintenance, canceled investments, engineers warning for decades while politicians smiled and cut budgets. Now you're sitting in the dark, staring at your dead phone like eye contact could resurrect it, realizing that all those conversations about living off-grid were just empty hashtags on Instagram. Digital performativity without real substance. The irony is absolutely delicious. You spent years complaining about the electricity bill, cursing the power company at every rate increase. And now you'd give literally anything, your sneaker collection, your dusty diploma, maybe even a kidney, for a working outlet and the tedious certainty of electricity on demand. But calm down, breathe deeply before you start rubbing sticks together like your failed ancestors, who took 40 minutes to make a pathetic spark. Let me tell you a secret that will completely change everything about your electrical survival. It's something so simple, so fundamentally obvious once you hear it, that you'll hate yourself for not knowing before. But first, you need to understand exactly how we got here. Because context matters when you're rebuilding civilization with scrap. If you're listening to this now and thinking, but I don't really need electricity to survive, our grandparents lived without it, congratulations, hit the like button right now. Because you clearly understood absolutely nothing about the modern apocalypse. Our grandparents had agricultural knowledge transmitted through generations, interdependent communities, hand tools, and practical skills. You have Wi-Fi and anxiety. It's not the same thing. Comment which electrical device you would save first when everything shuts down. Your answer reveals more about your survival chances than you imagine. And subscribe to this channel, because practical knowledge about electrons and voltage can be worth more than gold. When civilization completely crumbles, and I am not exaggerating or being dramatic, 1 bit. Oh, and there's a specific thing about car batteries that absolutely nobody told you. A simple trick that quadruples their lifespan and that everyone ignores out of laziness or ignorance. But that comes later, much later. You'll have to listen to everything before reaching this gem of information. There's also that question about why you should never use tap water in batteries. But that revelation comes way at the end when you're already desperate enough to pay attention to chemical details. Oh, and before we continue, I put together a separate video about blackout survival that covers scenarios closer than you imagine. Attacks on electrical infrastructure, solar storms, grid terrorism, cascading collapse of aging transformers. It's not science fiction. It's literally what energy security experts lose sleep thinking about. It's in the description, worth listening to. Especially considering that the last major government simulation of a national blackout predicted 90% mortality in the first year. But of course, you'll be prepared. Step 1. Understand that you're dumber than a spinning magnet. Electricity isn't magic, although it absolutely seems like it to you who barely scraped by in high school physics, copying answers from the nerd classmate. It's literally this brutal simplicity. Move a magnet near coiled copper wires and electrons start flowing like water down a mountain. Faraday discovered this fundamental principle in 1831, playing with coils and magnets in his Victorian laboratory. And since then, entire humanity built all its comfortable existence on top of this stupid, elegant, and brilliant trick. You spin things. Giant turbines in hydroelectric plants, rotors in nuclear plants, propellers in wind farms. Permanent magnets or electromagnets create oscillating magnetic fields. These magnetic fields push electrons through metallic conductors. Flowing electrons are electrical Current lights bulbs and charges phones and keeps your refrigerator running. Simple, primitive, elegant. Democratic even. Physics doesn't care if you're a billionaire CEO or street beggar. Electrons flow equally for everyone. But here's the cruel problem that will completely ruin your day. You need constant, perpetual, tireless movement, not occasional movement when you feel inspired. Not I'll spin this real quick when I need light. Continuous, repetitive, monotonous movement until your muscles scream in agony or your improvised equipment crumbles into pieces of fatigued metal. Physics doesn't accept partial effort. You stop spinning, electrons stop flowing, instantly, without mercy. And there's much more, something critical about voltage versus amperage. That 90% of people completely confuse, and that can literally explode in your face, or fry your expensive devices, or electrocute you to death. I'll explain this in detail in a few minutes when we talk about complete systems, because right now you still don't have enough context to appreciate the distinction. Here is your first practical DIY lesson. Grab an old electric motor from anything. From that broken blender you threw away, dead desk fan, abandoned electronic toy, any simple DC motor. Now connect to wires to the electrical contact terminals. Manually spin the shaft with deliberate force. Feeling the resistance. Feel that strange sensation of fighting against something invisible but definitely present. That magnetic resistance that seems to try to hold the shaft. Congratulations. You're generating real, tangible, measurable electricity at this exact moment. Measure with a cheap multimeter from those $10 ones and you'll see the numbers dance erratically on the little screen. To volts, 3, maybe 5 volts if you spin like a desperate person having a seizure. This is absolutely pathetic. Visually imagine trying to fill an entire Olympic swimming pool using a medicine dropper. You're technically adding real water, how molecules going from A to B, but you'll literally die of old age before accumulating enough depth to swim. Your improvised motor is technically creating genuine electricity. Real physics is happening, but not enough to charge a modern phone. Before the apocalypse becomes a distant memory, and your body turns into a skeleton still spinning that pathetic motor. The real risk here isn't electrocution. You're barely generating enough energy to feel an annoying tingle on your tongue. If you lick the wires, which please don't do, the true and insidious risk is catastrophic waste of time and precious caloric energy. Every physical movement of yours burns real calories. Calories come from digested food. Food is absurdly scarce in the end of the world. You're literally objectively transforming your precious limited survival resources into some completely useless volts for any practical purpose. The math is brutal when you stop to calculate. To generate 100 sustained watts for 1 complete hour, enough to light a weak incandescent bulb or charge 3 phones, you'd need to pedal furiously on an adapted bicycle, burning approximately 300 calories of metabolic energy. Those 300 calories, a large plate of rice, 2 chicken breasts, 3 bananas, could keep you alive and functioning for an extra half day without doing absolutely anything except breathing and existing. So here's your first impossible apocalypse decision. Artificial light now for immediate psychological comfort, or caloric reserves later to not starve to death next week. Choose wisely, because wrong choices kill slowly. And we haven't even started talking about storage, because generating electricity is completely useless if you can't store it for when the sun sets, the wind stops blowing, or you're too exhausted to keep pedaling. But that's a complex technical problem for 3 minutes from now. There's also the question of voltage regulation. Because your electronic devices are demanding and fragile, they need exactly the right voltage or they die permanently. But calm down, patience, let's build knowledge in layers. Like competent engineers instead of desperate improvisers.